8:42. Welcome back to BT Vancouver on a Monday. Thank you so much for joining us. Another demonstration in support of Black Lives Matter lasted throughout the weekend. Protesters blocked the Georgia and Dunsmuir viaducts, referencing the fact that when the viaducts were built, Vancouver's black community was displaced. Joining us now to continue the conversation this morning is Stephanie Allen with the Federation of Black Canadians. Hi, Stephanie.
Good morning.
So there was a reason that protesters were standing on the viaducts. They're still standing there now. Do you mind explaining what happened to Hogan's Alley?
Yeah, the community was kind of formed because of racism. Honestly, the black folks were not welcome in many parts of Vancouver in the late 1800s and early 1900s. And so what happened was, over time, even though they weren't welcome elsewhere, there was still a lot of pressure on this community to leave. Black people were not welcome, and there was a lot of prevailing racism, both through the City of Vancouver policies and through just the surrounding society that put a lot of pressure on this community to leave. Eventually culminating in the construction of the Georgia and Dunsmuir viaducts replacement project right over top of the community.
And you were there at the protest this weekend, educating people who were attending or walking by. How do you think the message behind this protest connects to the larger issues of white privilege and systemic racism in Canada?
It's our premier mentioned in his statement that, his children and his family don't feel the same pressure because of their skin color. And that was a glimpse into somebody acknowledging privilege. But what we've got to do is go a little further and look at how our whole system has been structured to exclude some people and to include others. The protesters down there today that I saw this morning as they were being moved along, many of them are white folks that see the need to support and stand by in the name of justice and to see our systems change.
Yes, and these are protests that happened all over Canada, not the one that happened specifically in Vancouver. Let's get into some more examples of how people can start unpacking their privilege and use their privilege for positive change.
I like to describe privilege as something that, we didn't necessarily create, but we've inherited, and therefore we have some power to do it something with it. White folks definitely have privileges in our society. They see themselves represented in positive ways in media. They have access to certain opportunities, and sometimes it requires asking the question, who's not here, whose voices are not included, and whose situations are not represented in the policies and in the organizations I'm a member of. And by asking those questions, you can really use your privilege to start holding a conversation that, for many people who are marginalized, they would be penalized for having those conversations and raising those issues.
And as we know, when more groups are more diverse, it can lead to more positive changes, right?
Absolutely. Diversity is kind of the end goal, and equity is the way you get there, with justice as really the prevailing guiding principle. And so when we can build situations that are inclusive of people's voice, not tokenizing them to just have a face that represents a certain group, but to really have those voices empowered, to have them at the helm of decision making, that's when we can see changes happen, and these persistent and long-standing racist, ways of doing things start to turn around.
And as we know, the police are moving in on the protesters this morning that have been camped out on the viaduct since Saturday morning. What is your reaction to that? Do you think that they should be entitled to stay there longer?
I think what I look at when you see protest action is some of the most important things in our world. The civil rights movement, the anti-apartheid movement, movements that really changed the course of history because people stood in civil disobedience peacefully to bring attention to issues. The young people here are probably being guided by the same principles. Many of them that I spoke to are, and they really want to see the system change for the better for people whose lives have been so dramatically impacted by institutionalized white supremacy.
Stephanie, thank you so much for your time this morning once again. Looking forward to chatting with you next Monday to continue this very important conversation.
Thanks so much.
That is Stephanie Allen with the Federation of Black Canadians. She'll be joining us for the next 2 Mondays to continue this conversation.